And Mordecai, I'm thinking, why do you think I'm here? It's because you do impart that.
I'm so
I never, I
grateful.
never thought I would feel like this about this.
Right. I know. People don't realize. I realize. I know. Anyway,
When did you start learning Torah in this way? I
uh,
mean, this setting, the Zoom setting.
only since COVID, I
Hmm.
COVID forced me into doing this, and of course, I wouldn't want to go back now.
Did you have a daily group before that?
No, no, I never had a daily group. I would have weekly classes. I used to have a Talmud class on Saturday afternoons back in St. Louis, and yeah, and then I had a Bible class that met for a long, long while. In fact, your mom, Shira Beth, was the one who got me started. She came to me and said, "We'd like you to do this Chavurah and study." I don't know if she suggested studying Bible or if I suggested studying Bible, and we get together in people's homes. But your mom was the one who really did that for me way back
Mm.
1974, 1975. Yeah.
Wow.
It makes me very happy to hear that.
Yeah, no, it was such a tragedy when she had her stroke. Wow, just incredible. So sorry, Anna. Yeah,
Anna.
yeah. So let me make my bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Can we dedicate our learning this morning to her memory?
I would like to do that,
Thank you.
of course. Here we go. So we are on to the next parsha. Um, I am sort of, if I have more time, and if this is something that you would like or people would like, we may do a different class at a different time and start working through the Torah, in Keseder and not jump around the way we are. And that might be a fun thing to do. But we'll see. Right now, I do not want to take it on. It's too much. Here we go. So we have already experienced, I believe, six, I think. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a seventh plague that we're about to talk. I think, let's see, that Tzach Adash Ba'achav. Okay, so we've already had six of the plagues. So, no, seven of the plagues. That's the acronym for the plagues, for the 10 plagues. So, and yeah, so we're on to no, we've had six of the plagues. And no, sorry. We've had seven of the plagues, and we're on to the last three plagues. Forgive me for having to sort of figure this out in my head. Yes, this is the eighth plague that we're about to have. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Hashem said to Moses, Bo el Paro, come to Pharaoh. Ki ani hichbadati et libo, for I have hardened his heart, ve'et lev avadav, and the hearts of his servants, leman shiti ototai, in order that I may place my signs, Ela, these my signs, bekibor, in his midst. Now, I don't know if any of you have sort of discussed the issue of God hardening Pharaoh's heart, and that seeming to be unjust and unfair. And here's how, I don't know that this necessarily makes it more fair, but I think it is the way of the world. And that is that initially Pharaoh hardens his own heart. As you go through these plagues, Pharaoh hardens his own heart, and it's only at a certain point that it talks about God hardening Pharaoh's heart. And I think the dynamic is that initially acting in a stubborn way, or let's say acting in a wicked way, any kind of wickedness initially is generally prompted by our own personal decision. And then as we start to get used to doing it, if we repeat the offense, if we don't learn from the first time, and then we don't learn from the second time, and we keep repeating the offense becomes less and less of a problem to us. I think we can see living examples of this. And and the way to describe it at that point is that God is doing this to us. Because,
Well,
yeah, go ahead. Oh,
why, I'm not sure if you're saying it's metaphoric and not God intervening, because if it is, why wouldn't God intervene and soften people's hearts?
right. Okay. So the reason why is that if for us to have any sense of worth as human beings, we have to have just enough freedom of choice. If, look, theoretically, God could have created a perfect world, but had the world been created perfect in the sense that no one was ever, never, no one was ever wicked, no one ever had the choice to become wicked, there'd be no purpose in creation to begin with. In other words, we can understand that God, in giving us that freedom to choose between good and evil, giving us the ability to learn, gives purpose to our existence. And that the purpose of our existence is to learn and to become wise and to learn from our mistakes and therefore find life worthwhile.
So
It,
was that mean that everything was perfect, but then we were given intelligence to mess it all up?
well, that is the metaphor of eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That is
Oh,
what it is at that
okay.
particular point.
Okay.
All right. So that's the way they sort of deal theoretically. But the truth is, the world would have been a static place, and the world is not a static place. It's a dynamic place. But I can see people who have become so inured to their bad behavior that they are lost souls at this point.
I think I understand from what you said and from my thinking about it that if he had made the initial um, decisions to be hard-hearted and wicked,
Correct.
that it's not up to God to undo that. But if God keeps him on that path, there's still nothing that would prevent him from making a different decision and softening his own heart. I mean, other than he doesn't want to.
Correct. If I'm understanding you correctly, Lauren, the possibility of tshuva is always there. It is always there. It just
Yeah.
becomes more and more and more difficult.
But
Uh,
God's not preventing it by the act of
No,
hardening his
no,
heart.
correct,
I
correct.
have one more
But
question.
yes, please.
So, and maybe this is also being brought up for me by us talking about Musar so much. If you love someone and you see them hurting themselves in a certain way that will um, hurt them and hurt their family, do you speak up at the risk of hurting their feelings? Um,
That's if I didn't want to interrupt you. If you've asked your question, I'll respond. So what life has taught me is that I in that situation, I will try and find a way to point out as kindly as I can and hopefully as loving a way as I can. There can be no trace of anger in my voice and no trace of self-righteousness in my voice, just a way of trying to bring it to that person's attention. And if they kick back, perhaps I might try one more time, but there's a good chance that I'm going to realize that my pushing is only creating a pushback. And at a certain point, you have to sort of resign yourself to letting them, live out their own experiences. Now, I will tell you that in addition to that, because I'm not God and because I'm not all knowing, there are times when I have been able to hold my peace. And because this is in the sense that I believe in karma, right? That while I know that were I to take that course of action, it would have extremely negative results. In their case, it doesn't necessarily have those negative results. It's just a point that there are many times that I have seen where my judgment was incorrect.
mm,
So I will mention it as many times as I feel I can, in which they can try and hear my words. It's not just a question of my speaking. It's also a question of being in a relationship where I know my words will be given some consequence. And
okay,
so,
so the question also is with Pharaoh's heart being hardened
Mhm.
if it was not pushed so many times. I know there were plagues. I know there were consequences.
Yes, right.
And eventually there was freedom.
Well, they're always freedom, you mean for the Israelites? When you
Yeah.
say freedom. Yeah, I mean, he at a certain point he chased them out. He couldn't stand having them anymore. But you're going to see that in this particular passage, whether we get to it today or we get to it, God willing, tomorrow or the next day, you'll see that we already see a process starting to happen. Okay,
Thank
and
you.
and I think that's part of the brilliance of what we're reading right now. Is it really is trying to give us some sense of human nature. Human nature in and of itself has not changed. In all the centuries and all the millennia, human nature is human nature.
I need help. This is good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you do have to, if you see somebody you love, just the case you outlined, you want to say something. But if they refuse to listen to you, I don't think you have to go to the point where you may have, in fact, there's a way to express it, but the results may be just the opposite of what you're seeking if you keep taking a proactive stand on it.
Well, yeah, so I don't want to be kicked out.
No,
Also, I don't think you have to do
Yeah.
it twice, because once you've stated your opinion,
I agree.
they have it in their head to think about it. And I have seen results of saying something to someone who resisted me and years later told me she thought about it and changed her behavior because of what I said. So, I mean, but the more people push, the more I mean,
Yes.
I wanted to tell you, I started watching Downton Abbey because of what you were saying the other day.
Yes.
I've been resisting it for years because everybody is saying to me, I have to watch it. I have to watch it. It's so good. It's the best. It's so good. It's like, I don't want to watch it. I'm watching other things and these are all so good. And, just leave me alone. They're just, you have to, but you have to. And the way you presented it, and I respect your opinion and everything, as literary as you are, and it's like, I'd like to watch it and enjoying the heck out of it.
No,
Thank you.
I'm so glad. That's so funny. Thank you for
I
sharing.
hated the pushing. I can't stand to be pushed. I'm always going to push back no matter how good something is.
That's what I learned. Not just with you, Lauren, honestly, but it's human nature. Let me just say one other thing. There's actually a verse in the Torah that says, "Hocheach tochiach et amitecha v'lo tisa alav avon." Now, this is really, sort of a combination of what we're talking about. It says, "You shall surely correct your neighbor, and do not bear sin on account of him." Meaning, it goes this far. Lisa, you might find this interesting, is that it's saying that if you don't bring it to their attention, you are partially guilty for this person sinning. If
Oh
you
my.
don't let them know, you are
Okay.
not responsible. But again, so hocheach tochiach, maybe it means, maybe we could see it as saying, well, maybe you do it twice. You know what I'm saying? But at least you do have to let them know. And the truth is, it's always, you always have to sort of feather what you read in the written Torah with circumstances. So if you feel you can say it more than once, you do. But there are people who, if you say it more than once, it's going to have just negative effects, and you don't want to do that. And you can also understand the second half of that verse, right, that I just quoted, and not bear sin on account of them, as in a way a correction, and saying, but don't do it in such a way that they're going to push back and do even worse.
Mm.
Okay, let's keep going here. I think, oh yes, Ulaman Shiti, right? This means, and in order that, so Shiti, it's sort of an almost like a gerund, okay? Because Shiti is a possessive form. It means my placing. And so Rashi's going to comment on this. So here's just the catchphrase: Vayomer Hashem el Moshe bo el Paro vehitrebo or vehatrebo. I'm sorry, I need to probably see the pointing of this. Vehatrebo. It means give him warning. And I'm sort of meditating a little bit on the fact that it doesn't say lech el paro. It doesn't say go to Pharaoh. It says come to Pharaoh. And I feel like there's a connotation with that. So when you're coming to someone, it's sort of like meeting them. It's sort of thinking about them. It's sort of saying, try to speak to him so that he'll listen. I mean, imagine to yourselves this story, right? What would have happened had Pharaoh said, you got a point. We really need to, we're not being fair. We're being silly here. If you guys want to go, go. Didn't do it. So it would have been a very different story, right? Here's this word, shiti. So he says, like, see me, my placing, she'ashit ani, that I will place. So Rashi says, taking this, what sounds like a possessive of a noun, my placing, into a verb, right? That I shall place within him my signs is what this is saying, right?
I remember learning that the bow also can be understood as meaning come to Pharaoh.
Yes.
When you say to somebody, come, you're saying, take yourself to the place where I am.
Right. That's it.
I, the speaker. So God is saying, like, I'm there. Don't worry. I'm there too. I'm everywhere. I'm also with Pharaoh. And when you go to Pharaoh, I'll be there too.
Right. That's beautiful. And also something else that I'm thinking. Remember how we'd read commentaries about how God commanded Moses and Aaron, and what was he commanding them? He was commanding them to be respectful. So when you're coming to someone, in a sense, you're humbling yourself in the sense of coming to them as opposed to going to them.
And if you're
sense of respect.
coming to them to rebuke them,
Well,
it's really good to try to understand why they're doing what they're doing, and how it came to be that they're the type of person that would make those decisions, and to be very understanding, and come to them before you rebuke them, so
right.
that they'll know that you understand, and that you're trying to build a bridge into from
Right.
where they are to where you think they ought to be.
Yes. That's lovely. It really is. I was thinking of a phrase that I think my parents or my mom taught me, which is Rotzeh harav ba'elav. In other words, if you want the rabbi, go to him. Don't expect him to be there. Just go. Don't wait for him to come to you. You go to him. Come to him. Anyway.
That explains a lot.
Pardon? I'm sorry.
That explains a lot.
From my childhood, you'll have to forgive me. All right. Ulama'an, and in order that, this is so cool, to saper, you should recount the oznei vincha, in the ears of your son, uven bincha, and in the son of your son, your grandson, et asher hit alalti b'mitzrayim, how I mocked Egypt. Okay. Ve'et ototai, and my signs, asher samti vam, which I placed in them. Vidatem, and here's this phrase, vidatem, and you should know, ki ani Hashem, that I am the Lord. So part of our doing the Seder every year is, in fact, the fulfillment of this mitzvah here, right? And part of it is to reinforce our belief that there is such a power that is beyond human, control, and that in fact controls the destinies of the universe. So I love this. This is so nice, right? And in a way, it's sort of saying there's a story to be told. That's it, right? To look at our lives as stories, and stories, some of which are really worth telling.
And I want to mention, based on what I was learning in this past week about the last week's Torah portion, and I'm looking ahead to Rashi, so he's saying something a little bit different. But we learned about how the first three plagues
Yes.
were not just, I mean, the reasons they were chosen, like especially with the first two, were not just something that was difficult, but actually getting rid of their gods and their magicians. In other words, like the first one was about the Nile.
Yes.
And there are two of the major deities of Egypt are about the Nile.
Yes.
And
Right.
the next one was this, like, the frogs. Well,
Right.
there was this frog god
Ah,
that is also a major deity that has to do with women and relations and fertility and things like that. So
interesting.
you're kind of taking away their gods. And then the third one is the one the magicians couldn't duplicate.
Right. Well,
And so you're saying no more gods, no more magic, but you're saying instead, you have to see that I am God, not
right.
just talking to the Egyptians, but talking, just demonstrating this is, not where the power is, not the Nile, not the fertility God, not the magicians. I am God.
Right. I think that's wonderful. It's a wonderful interpretation. By the way, a couple of things, I guess. One is that I always saw the first plague of blood as being a foreshadowing of the 10th plague. That that if they did not do this, blood was going to be spilled. They were going to die.
For
And
sure.
in the first, like the firstborn, the slaying of the firstborn. Uh, I think you're right, Lauren, about this, that this is the process. Incidentally, for them, the Nile was what made Egypt possible, right? The flooding of the Nile, the annual flooding of the Nile. And so talking about the Nile being God we're not necessarily talking about fetishism here. We're saying that to them, that was their science, right? They saw the Nile as scientifically giving them the possibility of agriculture, and agriculture, of course, making it possible for civilization. And of course, the Egyptian civilization was one of the greatest civilizations in the world at the time that we know of. And and so they put all their trust in it, just like
It's
people
true, but
put
it
all
also
their
was
trust.
fetishism in the sense that they did have a pantheon of gods, and they had major and minor gods, and two of the major gods had to do with the Nile. One had to do with the flooding of the Nile.
Right. But what I'm trying to do is to take this underneath it and show that their attitude towards it is similar to people's attitudes when they see money as being something that empowers them,
Mm-hmm.
that makes it possible, and they worship money, or they worship, and you can worship science. I believe in science, but I also believe that there's something that makes science possible, that this ineffable creator created the world in such a way, and human beings in such a way, that we can learn from nature, that we can talk about something called nature, that we're even able to identify something that we can call nature, and that God gave us the intelligence to be able to create computers and GPSs and things like that, that there's a step beyond the immediate causality to understand what makes it possible, and never to forget that. And in some ways, this is similar, and especially given the interpretation you just gave, that we shouldn't forget that.
I always think because they tried to find the origin of the universe, but that's not the point. The point is the origin of matter. Where did anything come from
Right.
before there was a universe? Fine, but the universe, what why was there matter that became a universe?
Correct.
Well,
Right. And it's a hypothesis. Okay. You're either left with the alternative of an infinite regression, where you can say what caused this, okay, then what caused this that caused this, then what caused this. In other words, you either decide that you can live with an infinite regression and that makes sense, or you say there had to be a beginning. There was something that got this all. There was at some point, a beginning happened. The universe happened. And not think that, because so you have to decide which
but
makes
doesn't the
sense.
definition of God include infinity?
God is beyond infinity, because one of the loveliest things, and this had to do with, I believe he's the current rabbi of traditional congregation. His name is escaping me for the moment. If you can remember his name.
It'll come to me.
Okay, because I'd want to give him credit for it, because it occurred to me.
Gordon.
Rabbi Gordon, yes. Okay. So I once was having a conversation with Rabbi Gordon and saying, when you think about the things you know, and then compare it to the things you don't know, look at how small that first little category is. And Rabbi Gordon said to me, yes, he said, that's so true. But how about the things you don't know?
So, but were you kind of saying God created infinity
I'm
when you
saying
say
that,
God was beyond infinity?
yes, God is beyond infinity. Our ability to conceptualize is something that God has given us.
Hmm.
God created us in such a way that we can conceptualize. And not only that, by the way, if you study mathematics, you realize there's more than one infinity. There is a countable infinity, because 1, 2, 3, 4, you can go on for infinity, right? But there's also an uncountable infinity. And I think it's called Aleph, okay? And that is an infinity that's uncountable, because if you think of and interestingly enough, the real numbers, meaning numbers such as, numbers that you can express as fractions, because if you start to get into fractions, you realize that between 0 and 1, there's an infinite number of fractions, but they are countable. You can actually
Yeah.
set up a system of counting every single fraction there
And
is.
you could half the countable infinity.
You can, because the decimal numbers, that is decimal points, 0.01, etc. You follow me? That's uncountable.
Hmm.
You cannot find a way to match the number of decimal possibilities with the number of natural numbers. Natural numbers being 1, 2, 3, 4. That's countability, is being able to associate, to map the countable numbers to whatever other set you're looking at.
Okay, so God created our ability to
Conceptualize.
understand that, but possibly created that itself. Like if we understand anything we understand about nature, or anything we understand
Exist.
about infinity or beyond, is only because of God creating it and giving us the ability to perceive it.
Correct. And not
Or
only
at least
that,
in part perceive it.
but look at the ineffable. The ineffable is stuff we can't even express, because we don't even know we don't know it. So there's no way to express it.
So this brings me to my concept of God,
Yeah.
which is infinite possibilities.
Well,
So you can't even name all the names
so
of God.
this is going even beyond infinite. It's saying we can't even capture God in words.
Absolutely. That's
no way
exactly
to express it.
that's
Yeah.
exactly what I just said.
Well,
That's just, did you understand what I said though?
I
Yeah.
think I understood what you were trying to say. The problem is, the moment you say it, you've said it.
Excuse me?
If you've said it, you've said it.
Yes, but I'm trying to impart what
Right.
my concept, I embody God as, which
Right.
is infinite possibilities, which is not expressible, so that it's constantly
Mhm.
expanding.
Yes. No, I hear you. I do.
Okay.
Rabbi taught me once that that's what the kind of part of the point of the Kaddish, that mentions so many different Yikadal, the Yikadash, and that it's just trying to, point to so many different descriptions of God and God's actions, to the point where that there's a lot. It's hard. I can't explain it as well as you did, Rabbi. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I don't honestly, but I do get, but of course it's true. By the way, the piece that I would include is the fact that it uses the reflexive. When it doesn't say gadol, which would be great, right?
Mhm.
It says yit gadal, may he be magnified. In other words, it's a dynamic process. In other words, constantly growing, constantly growing. You can't even capture it. And the reflexive nature of yit gadal, the yit kadash, may God constantly be, growing in being sanctified. In other
So
words,
that is
the
kind of what
constant
Lisa
process of
just said.
absolutely.
And
I yes.
this is so awesome, because also what's been going on for me is I've been wanting to slow down with each word of the
Good.
Kaddish.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Let's take a look here. Okay, we are actually out of time. So I will try and start tomorrow with Hit Alalti. Right? That you'll remind me tomorrow, God willing. We'll
Yeah,
start.
the Rashi on verse 2.
Correct. Okay, I'm going to stop the share. and stop the recording and thank everyone for participating.